Okay, okay,
Yeah, I'll do that. The restrooms and no food and drink.
okay.
Hey, Eric,
I'll be with you in a minute. Yes.
the TV just took us live. I just go with that microphone.
What's that? Greetings all. We're going to get started in about 5 minutes. So I am doing the pre-show announcement. One, I'm going to ask, this is our meeting house. Please no food or drink on this side of that opening to where the food is. And the second thing is, in case people haven't figured it out, bathrooms are kind of diagonally across that way. So we'll be going live in about 5 minutes.
Hello. Oh, we are working here. Okay. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our annual Hiroshima Nagasaki Remembrance, a shared call for nuclear weapon abolition. My name is Frank O'Gorman, and it is my honor to be the MC for tonight. Let's jump right into it, as they say. I would ask you to make sure your phones are silent. Our first speaker tonight is David Pontrelli. He is a longtime participant in the West Hartford Saturday Peace Vigil and regularly reads at the Hope Out Loud open mic. He has led creative writing workshops since 2002 And in fact, he's leading a workshop this October. You can see him afterwards about information on that. And he has also published a full-length collection of poetry and 2 chapbooks, which are short books of poetry. Let's welcome David Pontrelli.
Hello, everyone. Move this to the side.
David, do you want it higher? What do you want?
No, I was too far away, I think, on the podium. Thanks, Eric, for allowing me to read here and for that introduction. I'm going to read 2 or 3 poems, and I'm going to read about climate change to start. And people asked me to think about connecting this to tonight's subject. And the connection is, I wrote about climate change for a number of years and was involved in some actions, and it was very depressing. And then I went to the New York City Climate March. Did anyone go last September to the Climate March? Yay. And it was a different experience in that it was celebratory. It was like a big party. There's people playing music, dancing in the streets, young people, old people, people from there for many different reasons. Well, actually for the same reason, but from different backgrounds and different angles on it. So it was a new experience for me, and it helped me come out of that place of being depressed by the topic. So 2 hours before the buses were scheduled to leave Hartford, 2 buses had mechanical failures. And so that makes me a conspiracy theorist, I guess, to thinking that's kind of a little bit fishy. But people scrambled downtown and got on buses and trains and made it anyway. And I think that actually helped the people who went down. I think it freed them from, I don't know, it was just a more improvised way of doing the afternoon. And same thing coming back on the train. There's a lot of unity and celebration. So that's my connection to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That is, if you're involved in issues that are difficult to face, that there's that side of activism too, which I didn't know about until I went on this march. That part of it is celebration, and it is celebration. It is celebration when you act for justice. You know, what else? So that's a long introduction. So I rode on my bicycle. I was on my bike from Trinity College to get downtown and take a train. So that's part of the poem. And the first poem is called Bicycling to Union Station for a Train to the Climate March. A man on a bicycle rides toward me on Broad Street, excuse me, shouldering a bag filled with cans as big as a washing machine. "Wait for me," he shouts. "Hurry up," I joke back, and both of us grin. My legs are pumping in gray cut-off shorts and sneakers held together by shoe goo. My breath is deep as a monk's in a hooded robe, but it comes out fast, like an Olympic sprinter's. The whole sky pulses blue. A hawk swoops and lands in a tree branch, its wing bottoms flashing white in the sun. Ahead of me, a train crosses a rusty bridge and whistles. Riding to the Climate March, I am with the hawk and the can man, and my heart is hammering with hope. Thanks for that. And this is at the march. At the New York City Climate March. Let's go into the street, I tell my friend John, at the blazing corner of 56th and Broadway. And we stand around like activist cows, all 75,000 of us, waiting for the march to start. We talk about the buses that got canceled at the last minute and the best place to pee. Banners read, "Stop burning down the house. The heat is on, time to act. There is no planet B." I say hello to everyone who looks my way and feel a breeze saying yes. A woman named Davina is right next to me, wearing bright blue bifocals and a pink backpack. Her hair is gray, her face etched with telling lines, and the earth breathes through her, sees the dancers step and strut, hears the tambourine's eerie jingle and the drummer's wild rhythms, listens to the marchers shout, "Justice for the earth." Pigeons float between buildings like tiny kites. The black skyscrapers are stiff as straitjackets, but they can't hold us. We begin to move, a flowing mass of justice, dancing, singing, screaming. Tambourines cut the rough September air, and the drum's relentless beat is playing on Broadway. This is the real show. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for those moving words. Next up is Barbara Pivarnik, who is associated with the Catholic Worker in Hartford and was a high school counselor in Stores.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. This evening, just to remember, I'm going to read some excerpts from Dr. Ira Helfgen on behalf of Back from the Brink. He's a nationally and international peace activist, physician, has spoken and has changed lives from the young to us who are bearing through and getting to where we want to be in the world, and that's a more peaceful world. So let us remind ourselves of what is at stake here as we remember Hiroshima and Nagasaki, actually what happens when nuclear weapons are used. Let's consider a large-scale nuclear war between the US and Russia, just to imagine it, to help remember why we're here today and what we want to do as we go forth. I'll describe what a nuclear attack on a major city would look like today. We can imagine Hartford, we can imagine beyond Hartford. We all have images of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and these are important, but they do not begin to prepare us for the devastation that modern nuclear weapons will bring. Both of these cities, each bombed with one relatively small nuclear weapon. A major city like New York or Moscow or Atlanta would be targeted with 10 to 15 to 20 nuclear weapons today, each 60 to 50 times more powerful than what we used in Hiroshima. That is where we are at this moment. That is why we're here. It's hard to describe to you 10 or 15 bombs going off at once in different places. And again, this is Ira Gelfand talking, and I'm just speaking his words, his recollection. So I'll use the model of a single very large 20 megaton explosion within 1,000th of a second. And just watching the Olympics, you know, you watch the runners and they're within 1,000th of a second, or they're milliseconds when they win. So we know how quick they are, and that's just athletes. That's what we happily are rewarding as the countries come together. So a fireball arises, and it comes reaching out 2 miles in every direction, more miles across, and within this area, temperatures would approach those on the surface of the sun. It's something you'd see in a movie, but actually this is the reality. And everything at that moment would be vaporized. The buildings, the trees, the people, the upper level of the earth itself, all would disappear. To a distance of 4 miles where the bombs would go off, in every direction, the explosion would generate winds in excess of 600 miles per hour. So we understand hurricanes, right? 120 miles an hour. This is 600 miles per hour. Mechanical forces of that nature can destroy anything that humans can build on any part of that distance. And to a distance of 16 miles in every direction, heat would be so intense that everything flammable would burn: cloth, paper, wood, plastic, heating oil, gasoline. It would all ignite in hundreds and thousands of fires. Then we think about the West, right? And the tragedy of what's happening there with climate change and with man's inability to really take care of one another. And the fires would go over the next half hour. They would coalesce into a giant firestorm, 36 miles across, covering 800 square miles. And within this entire area, the temperatures would then rise to 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit. All the oxygen would be consumed, and every living thing would die. In the case of New York, it's my hometown, imagining New York, some 12 to 15 million people dead in a half hour. In Atlanta, perhaps 3 million. And if this attack were part of a large-scale war between the US and Russia, my goodness, are we imagining, or is this possible? Could this happen? And why we are here, why are we sharing this message? At that level of destruction between these two countries, a destruction would befall every major city in both countries. And all told, 200 million people dead in an afternoon. In addition, the entire economic infrastructure of both countries would be destroyed. That's between two countries, the US and Russia. And we see how quickly those buttons are pressed back and forth in defending who we are and not letting the other person have the last bomb. There would be no public health system, no banking system, no public safety system, and all the things we depend on to sustain us would be gone. And in the months following the initial attack, most of those who did not die on the first day would also die from starvation, epidemic disease, radiation poisoning. And we've had touches of that with other nuclear accidents. 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl. So it's not too hard to imagine, but we forget. And so today, here we remember. But these are only the effects in the countries that actually fight the war. The rest of the world would also be caught up. The fires ignited by these nuclear weapons would leave some 150 tons of soot into the upper atmosphere. We remember that soot from the wildfires in Canada, right? I mean, how upsetting that was to us breathing. And I was speaking to a woman this morning telling me that she was scared about a trip that her husband and I were taking, the Golden Rule trip last year, because of that soot. This is beyond belief, of course. In the upper atmosphere, that soot would block out the sun, dropping temperatures an average of 18 degrees Fahrenheit. And I'm reading these statistics, by the way, from Ira, really a scientist, a physician, a major international speaker from the UN and on. And he was a speaker here last year, so I'm very proud to just be able to get his words again, because I need to be reminded of them as well all the time. In the interior regions of Eurasia and North America, temperatures would drop 45 to 50 degrees. These are the conditions not seen on this planet since the coldest months and years of the Ice Age. And again, we have images of the glaciers. We see, and this has nothing to do with the nuclear devastation of what man is capable of. Humanity, I should say, is capable of. And under these conditions, all of the ecosystems which have evolved since the end of the Ice Age would collapse. Food production across the planet would stop. So again, we're not talking about Russia and just the US. It's what will happen to all of us, our brothers and sisters in the places that we are invisible to, really. And the vast majority of the human race, 5 to 6 billion people, would starve. Even a much more limited war, as we sometimes talk about that. You know, if we can just limit the war to a few countries that we're not close to, but, you know, they're working it out in their way, and how that is affecting all of us. So here, no civilization in history has ever withstood a shock of this magnitude, and there's no reason to believe that the complex, fragile economic system that we all depend on would do any better. That we allow these weapons to continue to exist. Even if no country ever deliberately decides to launch, that we allow these weapons to exist and not make a voice to consider and to share what this devastation would be like and how much we care for one another. So this is not about a negative, it's not about a drama. It's a trauma, a devastation. It's because we care and we love one another. We want, just as our families, to be safe, secure. There's always the possibility of a war by accident, as we know, at least 6 times so far during the nuclear weapons era, when either Moscow or Washington actually began the process of launching nuclear weapons, but was stopped. Always under the mistaken belief that they were under attack, only to pull back at the last minute when it becomes clear they were not, and that there was someone there who was able at that time to say, wait, stop, something President Truman did not do when he was considering sending, as I heard today on the radio, a 3rd bomb to Tokyo, just to be sure that the Japanese got the message. I actually never knew that. It is hard to get our arms around this terrible truth, and we look out on this beautiful city that we live in, and we simply cannot imagine that it can all be destroyed unexpectedly at any time. We may know what will happen, but it is still so hard to believe. And I'm just going to add, it's not in his comments, Ira's comments, that something I don't hear about, but means kind of the center of my life, is that prayer is powerful, and we need to pray in any way, or at least be silent and give ourselves some time to hear what we're called to do. Even just with families, you know, with our children, with a neighbor. Always with joy, right? With joy and a positive sense that we're in this together, and that there's a hope that will never, ever go away. Ever. That will always be our last word. So thank you for hearing those comments. So it's also my privilege to introduce and tell you a little bit about a neighbor of mine. I met her watering flowers, actually. She waters a lot. A little small garden in front of her house. She takes care of that, much like I remember the little prince who said, you know, it's the rose, it's the care I take for my little flower that makes a difference. Why am I taking this time? Because that care for the earth and for my little garden matters. So I really didn't know much about Marilyn Rossetti. I one day said, so how do you spend your time, or what do you do to relax? And she's like, relax? Not too much relaxing, but I'm on the city council. And I'm like, oh, that's amazing. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more detail about her, because I just learned these details a couple of days ago. And I like my friends and to know kind of who we are and what we do. And this is what we do. But the flower garden and the care and the compassion for someone who's on and representing us in the city of Hartford, I think is unmatched. So I'm reading the bio, and bear with me because I'm going to read every word of it because I'm so proud of Marilyn, and I'm sure she's proud of us and all of our traditions and all of our ways that we reach out to one another. Marilyn has been the president and CEO of the Open Hearth Association since 2011. For people who don't know the Open Hearth, it's the oldest continuing operating housing shelter for men on the East Coast of the country. Our most vulnerable, all the people in our family that haven't been able to make it, the people we know, the people that are invisible. Marilyn's there with the staff, providing what we need to provide for one another. Previously, she served as the executive director of HART. I didn't know what HART was, but it's written that Hartford Area Rally Together, a local community organizing nonprofit. And at the start of her career, she worked over 20 years, right? So this is a beginning. Then people retire or they, do other things that are important to them. So Marilyn started with 20 years in various capacities at United Technology Research Center, and that's Raytheon now, and then left in 2003. And so what to do when you leave a job, right? So we all know that we have just multiple gifts, and often we don't have a chance to use them, or they haven't been imagined in our heart and mind, but we do have gifts, and we continually are called to share those gifts. So in 2003, Marilyn previously served on the Court of Common Council. So being a New Yorker, we don't have any Court of Common Council. I didn't know that was the City Council. That's a city councilwoman, is who she is. So it sounded almost like a British Majesty kind of arena. But yeah, so she's our councilwoman. And I don't know where I heard this, but Marilyn has been serving for 2 years, ending in 2003, and she ran again in 2019. So think about that, right? 2003. And then a span of watering flowers and doing other things, and then deciding again to run. And do you know that she got the most votes of anybody in the city of Hartford for the council? That's amazing, right? So we're in a political time now, and it's good to hear who are the people serving us in our own community. So Marilyn, bear with me, because I'm just excited about reading the bio. And so Marilyn ran for another term, recently was again elected, with the term starting in 2024. Currently the majority leader and the chair of the Labor, Education, Workforce, and Youth Committee. Marilyn's a member of the Health and Human Service Committee and the Planning, Economic Development, and Housing Committee. So, so where does she rest, right? So where do we rest? And how much of the work, is being done? And how much work do we all need to contribute in these committees? There's the people that run them and the rest of us who, are called to serve. Marilyn served as commissioner for the Housing Authority of the City of Hartford and their chair for 8 years. Obviously related, the Housing Authority Open Hearth. So, right, that's the same spirit of providing shelter and a home for our neighbors. And she resigned in 2019 as required by state statute as an elected official, and presently corporator of the Hartford Public Library, which hopefully is going to be opening in the fall downtown. And people have been very excited about that, but I don't think anyone but the people who are on the board understand what that devastation was like and how long it took for the limits and the complications that went to that library. That was my first library job, so I made $1 an hour in New York, wiping records off the fine arts department that were getting the dust off. And so obviously libraries are a foundation, right? For learning and for the community. She's also a member of the Quilt Partnership and the Hartford Business Improvement District, and has served on the executive committees of the Hartford Guides, the Journey Home, the Hartford Community Loan Fund, and First Night Hartford. So the thing is, when I read or listen to a lot of accolades and descriptions of people's lives, I'm like, I go home and say, Wow, she did a lot, but I don't remember what she did. But I know she ran 2 terms for Congress. So I made copies for everybody of this. Just kidding, Marilyn, kidding. Okay, so finally, in another note, and this is my note, right? Marilyn's mother, Sally Eyre Rossetti, recently passed to her reward in heaven. Sally was immensely proud that she was a member of the Justice and Peace Commission at her church in Cape Cod. And Marilyn, like her mom, who she admired beyond belief, so a daughter would love a mother so, she has the same social conscience and commitment, as many of us do here, right? As many of us do, to peace and justice in our community. We're so grateful, Marilyn, you said yes, for taking time to write a little bit and share with us. So thank you for coming, and we welcome you.
Thank you, Barbara. Well, that was mortifying. You know, though, someone said to me, or I heard someone say once, when you do a lot of things, or when you're busy, what makes you tired gives you strength. So oftentimes when I'm going into work on a Monday and I'm thinking, oh my God, but then, I get going and all of a sudden that strength comes too. So, and thank you for mentioning my mom, Barbara. First of all, I'm humbled and honored to be here today. Certainly, after talking with Eric and Barbara and others, this is not a subject that I was super familiar with, but certainly I know how important it is. But I just wrote a little something because I think trying to tie it into some of the world that I'm in and all the common goals that we have. And I title it, Why We Need Peace. I read that the definition of peace is friendship and harmony without hostility and violence. In a social sense, peace is commonly used to mean a lack of conflict, such as war, and freedom from fear of violence between individuals and groups. But as a wise friend said to me, peace does not just mean the absence of war. Many experts will speak tonight on the issue of abolishing nuclear weapons and why, all experts who are far more intelligent than me. But that made me think about what I could offer to this conversation. I certainly can provide my agreement and admiration with what is presented and the efforts that have been done to date and continue to be done to abolish nuclear weapons and have a nuclear weapon-free world, peace. But then I asked myself, we need peace right here in Hartford. There is violence in the city of Hartford daily. I think we can all agree it stems from many things. Lack of access to equal and fair education, food insecurity, obstacles to meaningful employment, obstacles to fair, safe, and clean housing, to name a few. These things lead to a life where you feel you do not have a future, you have no opportunities, and your choices are few, if any. Today, we have a crowd here who understands all of this. It's like preaching to the choir. But let's preach for a minute. Just as you are the voice for such an important subject, you can also be a voice for issues and communities also ignored or overlooked by many. Not saying that you don't already. You can be a vehicle for change in Hartford. How, you say? Do you know someone who owns a business? Encourage them to make that hire they may not feel like they could do. Do you know someone who owns rental properties? Encourage them to rent to someone they might not be considering. Take a chance, change their life. Support the efforts for better schools in Hartford. Join a rally, write an op-ed, talk to others who may not understand the issue's importance. Support efforts around food insecurities in the same way. Change a life. As someone who runs a men's homeless shelter by day, I see the obstacles firsthand for many. See how often a small effort makes a dramatic difference, can keep men from a life of violence. These men can then serve as an example for their families and role models for other men. The paths shift. The domino effects works. I have at least 4 people I work with who have had close family members murdered in the streets of Hartford in the last 2 years. We should be outraged. We should look at this as equally as national and world issues. We are losing whole generations to violence, and that is not acceptable. It is just not. Children should not have to fear for their lives. Mothers should not have to continue to mourn their sons and daughters. And the absence of this violence is peace. Peace in our city, peace in our neighborhoods, peace in our lives. I want to express my deep gratitude for your efforts and your unwavering commitment to this global issue. But let's remember the battle we fight and face in our neighborhoods daily. The daily violence makes it hard for many to see anything beyond their immediate struggle. But together we can overcome these social issues. We can bring peace to Hartford. Thank you for time, and thank you for being a part of this critical conversation.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you, Marilyn, for your service and dedication. Okay. Okay.
Good.
Yep. Our next speaker needs no introduction. Please welcome Joe Wasserman, who is a peace and justice activist and a member of Back from the Brink, Connecticut.
Hello, everybody. First of all, I want to thank everyone who's... Okay. Okay. Hi, yeah, Joe Wasserman, Back from the Brink, Connecticut. Back from the Brink is a group, Dr. Ira Heflin was one of the founders whose narrative was read so inspiringly by Barbara. Who was one of the founders. Back from the Brink is working to bring us back from the brink of nuclear disaster. The world has come too close too many times. There's been too many close calls, and it's getting more and more dangerous. We see a number of flashpoints around the world that could turn into a nuclear confrontation. Ukraine, Korea, Middle East, we could go through the list. India, Pakistan, which doesn't get a lot of attention. And the consequences, as Barbara mentioned, in the narrative that Dr. Heflin wrote, are unthinkable. So we need to act, and we need to act in support of H Resolution 77, which brings us back from the brink. Some very clear steps that we're asking Congress people to support. One, get the nuclear nations to start talking to each other about reducing the threat of nuclear war. Get the 9 nuclear nations to talk to each other in a civil way, okay? 2, get the nuclear missiles off a hair trigger alert. There's too many possibilities of an accident because there's not enough time to determine if an oncoming blip is a system error or an attack. The world can end by accident. Cut the funding for modernization of nuclear weapons. We don't need to modernize this nuclear weapon or nuclear weapons. This money could be going into housing and education and other critical needs right here in Hartford that the councilperson mentioned. So there's a clear connection there. No first strike. There should be a commitment to no first strike. That's the other part of H Resolution 77. China and Pakistan have stated they will not be the first to use nuclear weapons. There are 2 nations that have stated they will not be the first to use nuclear weapons. The other nations need to follow through. Okay? But as of now, China and Pakistan are the 2 nations that have said they will not be the first to use nuclear weapons. Now, many of you wrote a letter. I would ask you, if you haven't written a letter, please consider writing one. But also, the other way you could help out is there's attached to the packet, which I gave many of you, there is an open letter. There's an open letter that we're asking faith leaders, public officials, unions, professional organizations to sign on to. So look at this letter, and we're asking you to sign this sheet. And signing this sheet would mean we will put your name on the letter. But also, you could check here if you'd be willing to circulate the letter. Okay? If you'd be willing to check here if you'd be willing to circulate the letter. And check here if you'd be willing to help with the delivery of the handwritten letters that we collected today to the congressional offices. Or the office of the congressperson in your district. Let's put it that way. So I'm going to get this around. Please write legibly. Please write legibly. So I'll start here.
Joe, you need
I have pens.
This is one of yours.
Oh, this is one of mine. Okay, I'll take it back then. Okay. And maybe we'll start with the back area too. Where can I start? Can I start here? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe, for your commitment and dedication and hard work for this cause. We will now have some musical and singing interlude, not interlude, but part of the program, essential part of the program. Please welcome Ian Fay, originally from St. Louis, Missouri. Ian enjoys folk music and having a general good time. Please sit back and enjoy some classic Woody Guthrie and other peaceful selections.
Okay, let's get the podium out of the way first off. Yeah, that's your singing, Mike.
Hi, everybody. Oh,
That's right. Slide right into the...
got no power and no juice yet.
No, there's no juice. There isn't. Yeah, that's true.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ian Fay. I also go by Billy Sunday. You can check me out on Instagram on Ian D. Fay. I also have a website, iandfay.com. If you want to check that out, I'm up there too. Yeah, I do original stuff. I'm going to sing you guys a couple songs. Here it goes. This song was originally inspired by a Bob Dylan lyric, which I later found out was a biblical verse, Matthew 11:12, from the days of John the Baptist until now. The kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and the violent take heaven by force. They're trying to take heaven by force, with guns and tanks and blood, full of doubt and remorse, laying face down in the mud. We can't hold this course, can't take heaven by force. Ever since the beginning, we're still out here looking for a kill. But there's something in us all the same. I feel it coming down in the summer rain. Can't hold this course, you can't take heaven by force. Now it's east versus west. Tell me, are you bigger or better or best? But there are some walls that fall by fire, and others by joy that never tires. We gotta hold on to this course here, 'cause you can't take heaven by force. And now the time's at hand. Though death and pestilence rule our land, a new day will dawn for those who stand strong. They can't hold this course, can't take heaven by force. Oh, well, it ain't so hard, though lies and darkness are. Keep your thoughts true, and you'll find that light that's been following you. Can't hold that course, gotta take heaven, but not by force. Thank you. And I'm going to do one more, and you'll probably know it, so if you want to help me, you can sing along. Sometimes the verse might be a little bit unique to me, but the chorus, I'm sure you'll all get. Here it goes. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream water. This land was made for you and me. Well, I was walking that ribbon of a highway, and I looked up above me, and I saw that red dawn skyway. And I looked down below me, and I saw that golden valley. Well, this land here, it's made for you and me. This land is your land, and this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to Hartford, Connecticut. This land was made for you and me. I the sand of her diamond desert, and all around me I heard a voice calling. This land, it's made for you and me. And there ain't nobody living, no, who's ever gonna stop me. While I roam down that freedom highway, and there ain't nobody living who's gonna make me turn back. This land was made for you and me. Well, thank you.
Nice job, Ian. Thank you. Am I on here? Yeah. Okay. All right. Just want to make sure y'all can hear me. Our next speaker is Carmen Worcester. Carmen Worcester is actively promoting peace and justice using media. She is the producer of the following shows: Peace is Possible, Hope Out Loud, Connecticut, Hope Out Loud, comma, Connecticut Veterans for Peace, and Back from the Brink, Connecticut. She is a volunteer with Vecinos Unidos, a retiree, former minister, former editor and managing editor, psychiatric social worker, investigative reporter, and last but not least, mother, involved in the peace and justice movement since the Vietnam era. Let's give a warm welcome to Carmen Worcester.
I attended a historically black college. It was called Wilberforce, and it was in Wilberforce, Ohio. So I was in my teens and 18 years of age when the Vietnam War started, and white recruiters wanted to come to our campus to recruit our young men. We were outraged about the idea, and so we protested. We called on the Black Panthers to march with us to the president's house at Wilberforce to state that we would not allow the recruiters to come on campus to take our men away. Well, we tried, we cried. We did more crying because they took our men away. Before the last year of my term there at Wilberforce, those men that they had recruited were no longer with us. They had bought into the narrative that they could get housing, they could get higher education, all of those things that the recruiters used to trick those youth into giving up their lives to fight people they did not know, who were people of color just like themselves, who were oppressed, had impoverished living conditions, and were impacted by colonialism. This brief message is about what was going on in the black community in 1945 and how the black community responded to the bomb. The black community in 1945 faced Jim Crow. They had pitiful working and health conditions and living conditions. And at that time, they thought perhaps desegregation would be the ticket to a better life. But this disintegration, it was just too much, way too much. It blew the minds of most of the people in the black community because, first of all, they mourned the loss of the Japanese from those bombings. They wailed, they cried, they fasted, they asked, Lord, why would a president do this form of extreme violence? They didn't use the word back then, genocide, but that's what it is. It's genocide. Now, many of the churches had sermons, one right after another, because of the bombing. So there was a lot of, oh my God, and what do we do? And then some groups said, okay, we've got to forgive President Truman because we can't make it any further unless we forgive him, because otherwise we will be in hate mode, and that's not going to help us to evolve to the place where we no longer think of war, much less act on warlike things, because it's violence. It's extreme violence. And it's extreme arrogance to think that anybody, because of color, is less than, not entitled to living. This whole thing had to do about living. And it also connected with all the peace efforts. None of the historians even talked about the black people in regard to response to Hiroshima. Black people identified with the Japanese. They did not look at them as enemies. And I think that's one thing, one takeaway that I'd like to share with you, in spite of all these notes, is that we are one people. We're one people. And we have the right, a God-given right to live. And this whole thing of nuclear weapons and nuclear war destroys that truth. The right to live, to love, to be joyful, and work and in community. James Baldwin, one of the writers during the incident, said that there is a relationship between the fights of civil rights and the struggle for world peace. Both fights are the same, he said. Racial hatred and the atom bomb both threaten the destruction of human beings. So what is it we don't get? Isn't that clear enough for us to understand that any form of violence is anti-human? Any form of prejudice is anti-human. So what I am here to say, and I'm going to use a Tibetan bowl to help with it for us today, is to encourage each of you to understand that our continuance is dependent on your peaceful self. Your peaceful self. If we don't have inner peace, we cannot promote it. We cannot even identify with it. And there will always be this, the other. There is no other. It's us. It's all of us. So what I'm going to do right now is just hit this Tibetan bowl to invigorate each of you, because you are enlightened beings, because you're here. You came out. This is not a comfortable subject to talk about. And I want you to know that it's your light that's going to help extinguish this darkness of violence and genocide. You can do it. You have the power to do it. We just need to increase our frequency. As a light being, each of you are light beings. You have a frequency. Everybody has a frequency. But we can up that frequency, and in upping that frequency, we eradicate the negative dark forces that will continue this war activity, which should not be happening on the planet. It should not be happening. So as evolved beings, I'm just going to, I want you to receive and be encouraged. Receive and be encouraged. You know, Jimi Hendrix said, when the power of love overcomes the love of power, then the world will know peace. You all are the participants for our future peace, and I encourage you to continue to express yourself like Guy Blythe, who's sitting in the audience. He's one of our honored Korean veterans. Guy, would you stand up, please? Yes. Guy, 13th, and Guy writes political, I just call them perfect pieces about propaganda. He is an analytical whiz, and so there is no age restriction, okay? This will also help you live longer. You need something to fight for, and I'm not even going to use the word fight. You need something to promote, and the promotion is love and peace and joy. We can have it. I want it. I don't know about you all, but keep wanting it. Keep wanting it. I tried to pick out some measures of communications from various black people during the 45. Mary McLeod Bethune said, "Are we to show our strength in guns and tanks and atom bombs, or in food for the hungry, plows to till the field, and in bringing peace to people of goodwill?" This is in 1947. Charlie Parker in 1950 says, "I've got a child, and I don't want to wait and watch that child die from an H-bomb. I don't want to see that. And I don't want the bomb to be in the hands of a political few." Bayard Rustin, who linked the chain of civil rights, anti-colonialism, and the bomb, said there must be unilateral disarmament. And he said, with no strings attached. Marian Wright Edelman said, governments throughout the world, led by armies, spend over $600 billion a year on arms, while an estimated 1 billion of the world's people live in poverty. Where is the commitment and political will to find the relative pittance of money needed to protect children? Now, we did have the last president, Barack Obama, said that the United States really has a moral obligation to address this issue. But most importantly, he said he did not want to see his 2 daughters grow up in a world where everything they know and love can be instantly wiped out. Let's change the scenario, people. You have the power. You have the power. Back then, the rallying song was "We Shall Overcome." Would you join me in singing that? We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome today. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome today. I'm saying today because it takes an instant in thought. Just takes a moment to shift gears and know that every day can be a peaceful day, and it starts with you. Power to the people.
I got you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carmen, for your inspiring message, for shedding light on white supremacy, and for lifting our spirits. Appreciate it. Our next speaker also needs no introduction. Wayne Costi has been a co-convener of the Hartford area Hiroshima Remembrance for nearly 20 years. He has been to the Hiroshima Museum in Japan, as well as the Nagasaki Memorial Museum. Wayne is responsible for a memorial display of soldiers who died in Iraq and Afghanistan that tried to be a place, the display tried to be a place where anti-war and those supporting the war could share a moment together, which was very rare in those days. Please give a warm welcome to Wayne Costi.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Before I get going, I want to spend just a moment with going a little bit off script here. Barbara had identified something she heard on the radio about a third bomb being dropped in Japan over Tokyo. This is a problem because there's so many stories that just can be made up out of thin air. There were 3 bombs that were developed. The Manhattan Project, enough material, fissile material for 3 bombs. One was Alamogordo in New Mexico, which was the test, and as soon as that was done, yes, they got the rest of the material off to San Francisco. Has the speed record off to Tinian, where they assembled the bombs and they dropped it as fast as they could. The first one was August 6th, the second one was August 9th, and there were no more. And a couple of side notes here. People have said that these are the bombs that ended the war. Well, in fact, what ended the war was after we had dropped all our bombs, didn't have anything else, we ended up saying, you know, through our Japanese negotiators, you know that term you wanted about Hirohito staying on, and that was kind of our sticking point? Well, you can have it. There's no point holding out anymore. We got the bombs. We've shown them. And to say that this was needed to end the war is absolute farce. The schedules at invasions of Japan was scheduled for November of 1945, 3 to 4 months hence. What was the rush? It was other stuff. The invasion of Kyushu, another one of the plans, was March of 1946. What was the rush? The rush was to get the bombs delivered before Japan imploded on its own, and to show the Soviets that we had this, we would use it. And we needed the people developing the bombs, of course, needed to show some work for all the billions of dollars that they had used up developing this technology. So, and then the one last thing was that the thought of going and using another bomb, from our point of view today, saying this, to bomb Tokyo suggests that whoever said it has no idea what happened. May 10th, 1945, 3 waves of bombers dropped regular bombs, followed by napalm, followed by thermite. They incinerated in one night 250,000 Tokyo civilians. Far more than were destroyed in those 2 bombs, but that has been lost to memory. And in fact, Robert McNamara, who should rot wherever, well, he did confess, so I guess that helps. But he told Curtis LeMay, his boss, his commanding general, we had better win this war, because if we don't, we're going to be tried as war criminals after bombing Tokyo with those firebombs. At any rate, I also have the unenviable task of following some great speakers. And so I'm going to have to move along now, and I'm going to be talking about a few things. So I'm going to now go to my prepared remarks. Sorry for the diversion, but you know, by the way, this T-shirt came from the museum in Hiroshima. So it's one of my souvenirs I haul out this time of a year. So greetings from the great state of Connecticut, where we gather to remember the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It is here that we raise our voices in a shared call for nuclear abolition. However, there are others in this state who undercut this noble goal by promoting the manufacture of nuclear weapon tools and the expansion of those tools as a godsend for good-paying jobs. In 2020, Senator Chris Murphy and others applauded the Navy's announcement of a $9.5 billion contract to Electric Boat to build the Columbia-class world killer, not world-class killers, world killer submarines. Murphy said the Navy's announcement today is good news for Connecticut and the hard-working men and women at Electric Boat. The amazing submarines built at Electric Boat that patrol the oceans defending our country are a technological marvel, and the Navy's investment today in the future of Connecticut's manufacturing will provide more highly skilled jobs for our state. And just yesterday, Joe Courtney announced the good news for shipbuilders and their supply chains. He said that the Department of Defense released $1.3 billion in contracts to Electric Boat that had been authorized last year. As a ranking member of the Seapower Subcommittee, Courtney crafted language to build up to 13 Virginia-class submarines. Courtney says this funding is the first down payment in that effort, and it will provide stability and a slew of work for the many companies across our state. Promoting that stability was clear intent of Congress when they passed the annual defense bill, and Courtney claims he will work to keep that momentum strong in next year's budget too. These weapons of global destruction are the greatest risk to humanity. The greatest danger is not global warming. It is nuclear weapons. It is the United States is waltzing its way towards that precipice. Passage of House Resolution 77, enhancing the goals and provisions of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, would go a long way to making those wasteful and dangerous technologies obsolete, and hopefully one day they can be dismantled. So where are we now? 5 years ago, on August 2nd, 2019, then U.S. President Donald Trump withdrew from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Force Treaty, or INF, claiming that the Russians were cheating. The U.S. provided no evidence whatsoever to back up those claims, and it appears the U.S. was just dissatisfied with the treaty with Russia because it didn't prohibit China from having nuclear intermediate range missiles. Rather than negotiate with China directly, the United States withdrew from the treaty. The Russians didn't overreact. They were unhappy with the turn of events. They said that as long as the United States didn't deploy intermediate range systems in Europe, Russia was not going to build new intermediate systems either. That all changed when the US deployed the Mark 70 containerized launch systems and the SM-06 short-range interceptor missiles, which can fire ground-launched nuclear cruise missiles. Now the United States is talking about deploying a new system, the two-stage Dark Eagle intermediate range system with hypersonic re-entry vehicles. Sound good? The Russians have said enough is enough, and now Russia is talking about building and deploying their own intermediate nuclear range systems. So we're back to square one. Passage of House Resolution 77 would be a good idea to get arms control back on track. The New START Treaty expires in February 2026. While both Russia and the US have indicated an interest in pursuing follow-on treaty, they have not, and the treaty would maintain a strategic equilibrium that exists under the New START Treaty. The lack of any ongoing contact between the arms control negotiators between the US and Russia makes any chance of having a new treaty in place by 2026 very unlikely. Russian officials have said they are no longer interested in trying to patch up an arms control relationship with the US. The prevailing mood in Russia is that the US has, over the years, negotiated in bad faith, seeking to use arms controls as a vehicle to sustain US strategic dominance as opposed to nuclear parity and stability. They observe that the US withdrawals from treaties once they're deemed to be inconvenient to changed US strategic objectives. To stop this madness, we must demand Congress support House Resolution 77 as a good faith measure. We must demand an end to currently destabilizing actions. The US Air Force in Europe reported on May 28th, 2 months ago, not even 2 months ago, yeah, 2 nuclear-capable B-52 Stratofortresses from a bomber task force flew over the Baltics and Eastern Europe. At one point, the B-52s, nuclear-capable, you don't know what's in the holds, flew roughly a few dozen kilometers from the Russian territory in Kaliningrad, a Russian enclave between Lithuania and Poland, and flew around the territory again on the way back. Playing nuclear war games within a few minutes of your stated adversary's territory is not a confidence-building measure, especially by a government that employs as a stated policy strategic ambiguity, which states a first strike is always possible. Ukrainian forces have pushed the button to attack Russian early warning systems deep within Russian territory using Western weapons targeted and operated by Western military staff. Such moves are destabilizing and can lead to mistakes. I believe there's 3 episodes of this already. They can lead to mistakes that we, the people of the earth, cannot allow. If accidental hair-trigger mistakes are to be avoided, early warning systems and verification systems must remain fully operational. With the weapons and delivery systems that they currently possess, Russia can completely destroy any country using nuclear weapons against them. We've heard Barbara give a recounting of the devastation that could occur. I've heard that if Russia is really threatened, they will absolutely vaporize any enemy. And what they say is, these people I hear, even if 3/4 of the Russian population die in the process, we have arms control. We must have arms control. We must demand Congress adopt House Resolution 77. Now let us turn to the Middle East. The Israelis are hinting at the possible use of enhanced radiation weapons or neutron bombs in the war with Hezbollah and Iran. This way they hope to kill people but not create a lot of toxic fallout. One problem with this is that Hezbollah has dug tunnels and their bunkers are deeper than 100 meters, which is too deep for enhanced radiation warheads, which are primarily designed to destroy advancing armor. One more point. The exact type of nuclear munitions used makes zero difference. Pseudo-experts talk about mini nukes or even only tactical nukes. This is total nonsense. A nuke is a nuke is a nuke. What kind of nuke is used makes no difference. It breaches the nuclear threshold, and then the nuclear tit-for-tat game is on. At a minimum, a nuclear attack against Hezbollah or Iran will potentially result in well over 200,000 non-nuclear missiles hitting the full depth of Israel, which really has no place to hide. Additional stories I've heard suggest that the Pakistanis are making it known that they would allow their nuclear weapons to retaliate against Israel in the event Israel uses nuclear weapons. Now let's be cheerful and talk about Asia, right? There are other potential flashpoints, including Taiwan and the Korean Peninsula. I will spare you any military analysis, but suffice it to say that neither the People's Republic of China nor the Democratic People's Republic of Korea can be defeated by the united West. Damaged, yes. Damaged terribly, yes. But they won't be defeated, whatever defeat means in these contexts. So we have at least 4 potential flashpoints. And for the engagement of nuclear munitions, we have Palestine, Ukraine, Europe, Taiwan, and Korea. That's a lot. We need arms control. Let it begin with a sensible first step of supporting the House Resolution 77, embracing the goals and provisions of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Thank you for your kind attention and for your joining in this shared call for nuclear weapons abolition. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne, for your dedication. Our next speaker is Ashley Fan, who founded We Are One Incorporated, which I believe is a support organization for people who have been sexually abused. Ashley is also a volunteer at the United Nations Association of Connecticut. Please welcome Ashley Fan.
Yeah. Go right for it.
Especially on public access.
Good.
Whoop. Hang on just a minute. Hand it there.
There you go.
Don't need talking to it.
Okay. Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for allowing me to be part of this event, and thank you for the introduction. Another thing that I would love to point out is I am actually the daughter of a Vietnam War refugee. So speaking about this in the company of people that care about abolishing nuclear weapons is really, really important, because I have seen through my father's eyes the pain that war causes. And it's a vicarious trauma that carries on to the next generation. So that pain exists in my eyes and maybe a little bit in my daughter's, but it'll continue if we don't abolish the things that are causing pain, which is war. So I've been invited to read a poem, and I chose August 6th. It's by Toge Senkichi. Sorry, I may be mispronouncing that. Translated by Karen Thornburg. Can we forget the flash? Suddenly, 30,000 in the streets disappeared. In the crushed depths of darkness, the shrieks of 50,000 died out. When the swirling yellow smoke thinned, buildings split, bridges collapsed, packed trains rested, singed in a shoreless accumulation of rubble and embers. Hiroshima. Before long, a line of naked bodies walking in groups, crying, with skin hanging down like rags, hands on chests, stamping on crumbled brain matter, burnt clothing covering hips. Corpses lie on the parade ground like stone images of Jesus, disappeared in all directions. On the banks of the river, lying one on top of another, a group that had crawled to a tethered raft, also gradually transformed into corpses beneath the sun's scorching rays and in the lights of the flames that pierced the evening sky. The place where mother and younger brother were pinned under alive also was engulfed in flames. And when the morning sun shone on a group of high school girls who had fled and were lying on the floor of the armory in excrement, their bellies swollen, one eye crushed, half their bodies raw, flesh with skin ripped off, hairless, impossible to tell who was who. All had stopped moving in a stagnant, offensive smell. The only sound, the wings of flies buzzing around metal basins. City of 300,000, can we forget that silence? In that stillness, the powerful appeal of the white eye sockets of the wives and children who did not return home. That tore apart our hearts. Can it be forgotten? Thank you.
Let me get this adjusted. Oop. That's about right.
Okay. Thank you, Ashley. That was powerful. You might as well stay up here, Eric. Our last speaker tonight is Eric Stam. Eric was raised in an activist family and remembers being taken on a Ban the Bomb march in 1960. So nuclear weapon abolition is a lifelong cause for Eric. He is active in the Quaker meeting here in Hartford and recently retired from a career in clinical social work. Here's Eric.
I want to thank everyone for being here today. You may have noticed the weather's a bit uncomfortable. We'd hoped to have a nice day in the backyard, nice evening, and instead we're kind of sweltering here. So the good news is this really is coming towards the end. A number of years ago, the Connecticut Coalition for Peace and Justice, a group that met here on Monday nights, starting around 2000, we were working on a Stop Star Wars in Space campaign. Not so successful, guys. Took over from AFSC, hosting the annual Hartford area Hiroshima, Nagasaki Remembrance call for nuclear weapon disarmament. I remember, I got here in 2001, I moved. And some of the older Hartford residents who were activists talked to me about how there had been a commemoration on the anniversary of the bombing for at least the last 25 years. Now, that's going on 25 years ago. So this really is something Hartford does, but not just Hartford. I want to congratulate you all on being part of an activity that's worldwide with thousands of communities acknowledging the tragedy that took place on August 6th and August 9th in 1945. So congratulations, you're part of a worldwide movement. I also want to thank the speakers and performers. But one of the things we decided to start doing is acknowledge the activist, our community, which gets very little recognition in the mainstream media, and have a moment of silence for the activist from Connecticut who had died in the past year. Because, again, peace activists, we don't get a lot of acknowledgement. So I'm going to read the names I know. I'm going to ask people if there are people they knew who were activists who have died this past year. And then we'll have a moment of silence, which is not just a general tradition, but I promise I'll stick with the general population, not the traditional Quaker moment of silence, which generally is about 10 or 15 minutes long. But one of the people who died in the past year was a wonderful performance artist and musician named Margot Hayes. A number of you may remember about 4 or 5 years ago, for 2 years running, she did a performance art piece that she developed specifically for us at this event, and she will be missed. From New Haven and the Peace Council there, Joseph Guernsey and Al Marder, both of whom were very active in the peace movement here in Connecticut. Where's Jim? Al died, I believe,
November?
well, more, he was 100 years old.
Well, I got my last email from Al on my phone I would like to share.
Then when the moment is, well, come on up and share it, yes.
Thank you, Eric. I knew Al Marder through Veterans for Peace, but Al did a number of things that I would have to talk an hour just to remember what Al had done. But on October 10th, 2023, about a month before Al died, he's 101 years old at the time he writes this. Dear friends, he also included a few other people, I am writing you from the hospital where I am seething in anger at what is taking place in the Middle East. Note this is 2 weeks after October 7th. I appreciate there are efforts to speak out, but I would urge that the coalition reach out to the centers of organized religion and ask them to speak up from the pulpits. What does it take? So here's a guy, 101 years old, that is just in his hospital bed and just thinking about peace. He did it since he was 14 years old, and he would deliver the newspapers to the union workers in the factories of New Haven. So, Al Marder presente.
Al really was quite a character, and I'm pleased to say I knew him. One of our own. I'm a Hartford Quaker and someone who is very active in our community, both as a Quaker and as a woman of peace, Lynn Johnson. That's my list. I would ask other people, who else should we include? No? Okay, then I'm going to ask, we have a, whoa, Ida. What?
Edie Fishman.
Edie Fishman.
She died this year, she was 103, and active to the end.
That's something I hope we all can have said about ourselves, that we're active until the end. So let's have a moment of silence and remember these people. Thank you. As I said, I'm a Hartford Quaker. You're in the Quaker meeting? No, even though it says 1799 on the brick wall. The building was not built then, but there actually was a Quaker meeting here then. And Quakers adopted something called the peace testimony, in which they renounced all forms of outward violence. This was done in 1660. So we kind of go back as pacifists. Here's the advertisement. You're here, you found your way here once. People are looking for a spiritual community. I would encourage you to join us at 10 a.m. on Sundays. It's a different spiritual experience than most religious gatherings. I want to thank Hartford Friends Meeting for providing us with this venue. And I also want to thank West Hartford Community Interactive, who are live streaming this event now on West Hartford Public Access TV, which will be available in a few weeks probably on YouTube. So I would encourage people to visit it if they're interested. Before we end, I want to talk about something happening here in Connecticut. You know, we talked about the fact that we're upgrading our aged out nuclear weapon systems. I always thought that was a great time to kind of get rid of them instead of replace them, but we're in the process of spending $3 trillion. And I encourage people to sit down and write out $3 trillion. That's not 9 zeros, that's 12 zeros. It's unbelievable. We're in the process of not just upgrading the weapons, which is what I thought, but I actually meeting with 2-Sub Joe Courtney to advocate for him to support and co-sign HRES 77. I found out it's really much more about the weapons delivery systems that are being upgraded. That basically the Minuteman missiles, they're old, they're tired, and there's real question why we're spending billions of do anything anymore in the modern age. We're actually here, Arsenal, we all are very concerned about Russia and Ukraine, because Russia has talked about using nuclear weapons, and scary, the Middle East. Another nuclear armed state is involved in an active war. I'm gonna be done soon, but I want to highlight something happening here in Connecticut. We have started building something called the Columbia-class submarine. This is a new class of submarine, and it's one of the scariest weapon systems I've ever read about. And it's being built by Electric Boat in New London, so this is a Connecticut product. The Columbia-class submarines will be 560 feet long. That's actually longer than the Washington Monument is high. It's the biggest submarine in the history of the world. There will be 16 missile tubes on each submarine. Each tube can have up to 12 Trident II missiles capable of carrying the W-88 warhead, which has a 455 kiloton blast. So with 12 submarines, which, let's do the math, 12 times 16 times 12 equals, times 12 equal 2,304. That's how many bombs there would be that have a 455 kiloton capacity. That adds up to 1,048,320 kilotons across the fleet. For reference, the Fat Man atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima had a 21 kiloton capacity, and the Little Boy dropped on Nagasaki had a 15 kiloton capacity. I'm going to repeat it. We're talking about a fleet that has 1,048,320 kiloton capacity. This is what nuclear weapons are about. If you remember the game, War Games, the movie War Games, the supercomputer concludes the only way to win a nuclear war is not to start one. There is no winning in a nuclear conflict. Worldwide, currently there are 12,522 total nuclear weapons. That's an improvement. At the peak in 1986, there were 70,300 nuclear warheads. Our policy is called Mutual Assured Deterrence. Think of the acronym. And why this wasn't enough to say, this is a bad idea. I'm going to end with my father, John, talking about after 9/11, terrorism became a term we heard about all the time, terrorism, terrorism. And my father said the greatest act of global terrorism was Russia and the United States saying they were willing to destroy the entire civilization of the world if they couldn't agree. The single greatest act of terrorism is mutual assured destruction. So, thank you all for being here. It's a rough evening. I'm really impressed that so many people did turn out. We would normally be adjourning to the lawn to do a beautiful 30-foot candlelit peace sign, which many of us have been here before and seen. Unfortunately, I decided there's a good chance it'd be raining, and even if it's not raining, I'm not sure I want people walking around on the front lawn, and I don't think anyone really wants to be walking in grass at this point in the night. So that's all, folks. Thank you all for being here.